The Great West. It has all the makings. To the entertainer with the passion and dreams of putting their talent to work, it's a place where those dreams are found and conquered.
And action!
To the fan, it's a land of fascination. No other place on earth sees so much talent coming together from all four corners of the globe in pursuit of one common goal: conquering a dream. Nowadays, life in this land moves fast, but beyond the fast pace, bright lights, and dreams, this land holds a treasure more sacred than anything ever produced here. A rich history. A history that includes four brothers: Albert, Sam, Jack, and Harry Warner. Four brothers who gave all: their hearts, passion, talents, and ultimately lives, stopping at nothing to make their dreams come true, while building a solid foundation for the good of all others who come to this land to conquer their own dreams. Cass Warner-Sperling is the granddaughter of Harry Warner, the eldest founding brother and leading studio head. She is also the founder of Warner Sisters Productions, a company carrying on her grandfather's legacy and vision to educate, entertain, and enlighten. Recently, I sat down for a one-on-one chat with Cass by phone to discuss her family's humble beginnings and the enormous sacrifices they made in bringing their dreams into a reality, and how in the process, they became a definition in entertainment in the hearts of a worldwide audience. I welcome you now into my conversation with Cass Warner-Sperling. Hey Cass, it's Tony.
Hey Tony, how are you?
Pretty good, how are you doing?
Good.
So, let me set the scene. The year was 1906. Filmmaking was virtually unheard of. Talk about, in general, what inspired your grandfather and his brothers to go into the film business.
There are several reasons that they got involved in the film business. They were entrepreneurs of the highest order. And my great-uncle Sam was really the first one in the family to see the future of motion pictures. And, he was working in a park and went into a tent and got into a caboose, a train, and sat there, and on the walls of the tent were pictures of Yosemite going by, and you would be inside this train, and someone would be rocking it like it's moving, and people would watch these motion pictures of different places. And Sam would work at these places and run the projector and see the response of the audience, and found a used projector, which he didn't have the money to buy himself. So he went home and the whole family put their money on the table. He brought the Great Train Robbery home with his projector. Everybody was just in awe of what they were seeing on this sheet hanging on the wall. And they just gambled everything. I mean, the father, Benjamin Warner, sold the horse that took his meat delivery around, old Bob the horse, and his gold watch, which was his last heritage from his father that he brought from Russia. It was Russia at the time. It became Poland during the war. But he gambled at that, and everybody put their money on the table, and they bought the projector, and they were off and running. Finding empty storefront places, stores where they could run the Great Train Robbery. And that's after they tried doing it in tents, and it was just got to be too cold where they were. So it became a family passion, really. this sort of happened around the same time. And so it was like they were bit by the bug, all of them together. But Harry saw, what was going on there, and then he and Sam went in and saw the Great Train Robbery and came out and shook hands and said, we're in the business. And they never quit. The thing that got me is they just, from that decision on, nothing, not all the most incredible challenges in the world would stop them from reaching their goal. And I just find that so inspirational. I mean, if there's one thing I get across, it's that we need to get that spirit back in this country and have a dream. Please, whoever's listening to this, have a dream and just don't quit until you reach it. And it takes hard work and one step at a time. But, if you have the passion to make it happen, you can. And that's really the gist of my family's story, which I think is very important, especially in these times.
The story is so inspirational. They did stuff being used as the standard today in the industry, and it never fails to shock me. When I get emails by people that did not know that there were 4 brothers.
Well, why would they? I mean, why would they? There's no one telling their story, which is why, another reason why I felt this was the right time to do it, because I also found, you'll see in the documentary that I did, that I actually went on Hollywood Boulevard and asked people that exact question. And 99% of them said what you said, that it's a brand name.
Right.
So, it's my responsibility to let others know about these guys, because that knowledge of who started the company has never really been addressed.
Okay, so let's talk Jack.
He, being a very different personality than my grandfather, would do his shtick. Would never, someone would write a speech for him and he would never even look at it. My grandfather, Harry, was a very modest man. He didn't need a lot of praise, or didn't want a lot of praise in the sense of, aren't you great, so on. There's a really kind of cute anecdote which his secretary told me, which is when he was toward the end of his reign, a young man came and met him and was in awe of him, and Grandpa could tell, that he was. And he said to the young man, he said, you know what, I'm in awe of you because you have your youth, and if only I had more years to live. That his game was helping the planet.
Right.
He knew he had a very powerful communication tool and a responsibility, a huge responsibility that went along with that. And he truly, truly loved everything about that game. And his focus wasn't on, how he could get more accolades. It was on how he could help more.
Right. He definitely lived up to his motto, too.
Yeah, he did. He did. And I'm hoping, with the film and the book that I wrote in '93 called The Brothers Warner, that, people will find inspiration and encouragement and really empower themselves, or re-empower themselves with the ability to persist. But it starts with a dream. It starts with a dream that you do not allow anybody or anything to interfere with. Even if you have to do a job during the day, you have some time during the day where you're working on achieving that dream.
Right.
So that's what I hope, telling of the story will do. We'll bring that to the forefront and use them as examples.
The potential force of motion pictures for good has just begun to be tapped.
My grandfather did, I think, write his own speeches and had his own passionate way of delivering them. And I actually have some footage of him doing that in my documentary, which are quite moving. And also, I was so happy to find in my aunt's garage these records of speeches that he gave. That's how they recorded things back then on the record. So some of what you hear of Harry's voice in my film are from those records. And that to me is just priceless.
Oh, I can imagine, because to me, I mean, being a fan of his and being inspired by Harry from as far back as I can remember, and only ever seeing him in pictures, and then when I saw him on video, I was just, wow, I was in awe.
It's great I'm so glad that, you know, those were preserved and
right.
They're now digitized, and, you know, they're here, they're with us.
Right, absolutely. What was your earliest memory of finding out exactly what your family did? Was that pretty early on, or?
Well, I grew up, you know, my grandfather was a real grandfather. I mean, he loved family, and we were always out at his ranch every weekend. That was always a treat because it was a ranch, it was a gentleman's farm, and he had racehorses. And, you know, my awareness of what he did, you know, I think came in visiting the studio with my father, who was a writer-producer in Warner-Sperling, and worked on the lot. And just, you know, observing that my grandfather had an office there and was treated with respect, and I mean, it was interesting because he was such a down-to-earth man that I didn't really know he was that important, because he treated everybody, the janitor, the man on the street. I mean, he loved his employees. I mean, he had a whole system of keeping track of how everybody was doing. If there was some crisis in the family of an employee, he anonymously contributed to, you know, making their situation better. And, you know, just knew everybody by their first name, and that's how I saw him. I didn't see him as the almighty president, you know, who everybody kowtows to, you know.
Right.
I just never saw that. So, you know, and then going to the lot with my dad and seeing, you know, that they ate in a special place in the commissary, and, you know, it was just, it all kind of came together. You know, I put it all together at some point, but they didn't act like they were the big shots.
And action.
It was magical. It was toward the end of the studio system. You know, I was born in 48, and so by the time I was like, I don't know, I started going when I was about 8 or 9, because my dad would work. They worked 6-day weeks back then. They worked, you know, on Saturdays, and I'd always ask to go with him on Saturdays. So, you know, just to wander and see how everybody came together to produce this. It was almost godlike, because it was, you know, from an idea to a story that people could see, which involved a lot of artists and a lot of people, a lot of crew, actors, you know, the whole thing was mesmerizing to me, because everybody, it was really, you could see how everybody worked together and how it was a group effort. And I'd never seen that kind of art form. You know, my mom is a wonderful painter, Harry's daughter, Betty, and she, as a painter, you know, goes into her studio and paints a picture. But this cooperative art form, you know, really, because I like people and I like working with people, and my dad, you know, I think enjoyed that. I know my grandfather did. You know, that's kind of what I enjoy. I wish I could paint, but I'm not that kind of artist.
Right.
And just being around my dad and seeing how much he enjoyed story meetings, which he would invite me into at home. Even before I could read, I had a script in my lap, you know, pretending I was reading with them, and just seeing the pleasure they had in creating characters and backstory, and then a 3-act play, screenplay, was thrilling. I mean, it was just, I guess you could compare it to like being in a family of musicians, who really love their music, and you're just surrounded by it.
What were some of your grandfather's hobbies?
His favorite hobby was the ranch and racehorses and raising beef that he butchered himself for the family. That was one of his jobs with his father, so that was a pleasure to him. And then chickens, he'd have his own chickens and give us eggs. But raising racehorses and going to the track and, that whole hobby was a big part of his life, and he loved it.
Right.
He had, I recall him having maybe 4 or 5 and breeding and having colts, and there was one very special moment to me where we went down to the stables and this beautiful colt had just been born, and he put his arm around me and he said, "She's a winner, just like you are."
What were the holidays like in your family?
Well, we celebrated Christmas and Hanukkah. Being good American Jews, we were very Reformed Jews, but that definitely was very much in my life. I went to 7 years of summer camp and loved it. Camp Elohim, and there's just a certain what's the word I'm looking for? A kindness, a caring that I got from being introduced to that religion. And my grandfather was a perfect example of that. It's not just about you. It's how's your neighbor doing? How's the world doing? And my mother and my father were incredible examples of caring, and my mother still is. So I had that. I mean, that was really what the holidays were about. Was that more than how many gifts could we get?
Anybody in your family besides you, they're still making films?
No, my son, Cole Hauser, is a wonderful actor and is about to direct his first film, which he co-wrote. So he's starting to make films, which is great. He's been a working actor since he was 14.
Do you have a favorite film? And
Don't ask me that question. I have so many favorites depending on my mood, and I love watching movies, and there's certain actors that I love, and anything movie they do I love because they're in it, and directors and cinematographers, and it's too overwhelming to give you one.
Right. I mean, I'm the same way. I couldn't pick a favorite movie.
Mm-mm.
Give your thoughts on what you think your grandfather and brothers would think about how far Hollywood has come and the studio that they created.
I think they all would be thrilled. The fact that their name still exists on the lot. I think my grandfather would be pretty upset about the amount of money being spent.
Right.
I think he would be just outraged at how much it costs to make a movie these days. On a lot, in a studio. I think my grandfather, Harry, would be absolutely thrilled and excited at how it's expanded into the digital world, into the internet. I mean, he was very, very interested in the future and what ways films could be seen and how films could be used to educate, entertain, and enlighten, which was their original motto, which he came up with for the studio, which is what my company, Warner Sisters, is carrying forward. So, I think he would just be very excited about the technology, and I know Sam would be thrilled about the technology. I think, though, it always comes back down to the quality of the story, not all the bells and whistles, but is it good storytelling?
Right. What was his opinion, and your opinion as well, on remakes of films? Because I haven't really found anything that they did that was like a remake.
They didn't need to. They just went to the newspapers and got a new story out of the headlines, you know,
Right.
or they bought some novel that they developed into. I mean, I don't think that was something they felt they needed to do. They had plenty of ideas, and they had what I loved about the old studio system is they had a stable of talent that, you know, just all they had to do was their job.
Right.
They didn't have to be looking for the next job because they knew they had a 7-year contract, or, you know, so their attention could be on their art form.
Right.
I think is really sad that that's been thrown away, you know, with the baby with the bathwater, you know.
I agree. Now your great uncle Sam, he's known for being the father of motion picture sound, of talking pictures.
Mhm.
And you know, sadly, he died before he could ever see that come to glory. How did that change your family?
Hugely, enormously. He was a real innovative visionary, and just died too soon. I think the whole history of the studio would be different. I think, in fact, I know it would. And if my grandfather's son had lived, it would have been whole. I think it would probably still be in the family.
Right. Describe the brothers. What each one of them, what role they played at the studio.
Harry was the head of the team. You know, he raised the money for the films. He dealt with the stockholders who had to approve their list of films they wanted to do. And my cousin Jack Warner Jr. told me that he used to have the stockholder meetings in the dead of winter in a small town, you know, where nobody could get to. So, you know, that's how he managed to green light the pictures that he wanted to get done. Then Sam was really the visionary, the one who came up with gambling on, and no other studio at the time would touch it, the synchronization of sound, that technology. And it's really thanks to Sam that the family gambled everything and went that route, because that's what boosted them up to the top of the game, was, you know, the jazz, well, actually Don Juan and then the jazz singer.
Don't you know me? It's a little baby. I walk a million miles for one of your smiles. But when
So that technology was instigated by Sam's interest and Harry's belief. He saw from what technology Sam showed him that film could be used to educate people. At the time, the very privileged were the only ones who could go and hear great music, like the symphony orchestra and opera and things like that, which Harry loved. And so when they added music to, you know, the Philharmonic Symphony to Don Juan, people were absolutely amazed and blown away by that alone. And then the jazz singer literally had about 2.5 minutes of synchronized talking. But that was enough to start a whole revolution, which really assisted them in being ahead of the game and being at the top. And that was in 1927. So that was Sam's doing. And then Albert, or Abe, was in charge of distribution and sales. So he was really more than a bookkeeper.
Right.
He was in charge of, you know, once the films are made, of finding exhibitors and handling all that. And then Jack was, you know, once Sam was no longer around, he became in charge of production and would sit and watch the dailies and work with the editors on some of the films. And, you know, he was quite involved, but he also delegated a lot to very incredible talent like Hal Wallace and Daryl Zanuck and other people, you know, who really knew their craft. So, but he was the one who was in charge of production.
that too far?
Right there, hardest.
You talk about the last time you saw your grandfather.
The last time I saw him, he had a stroke. I was told he was unable to speak. My mother and I went to visit him, and when the nurse told him who was there, he sat up and said my name and reached for me. And I came over and he took my hand. He couldn't speak, but other than saying my name, which they were quite amazed he could even say that, because he hadn't been able to do that, speak in any way. Just took my hand and squeezed it. And passed something along to me, and that's what took, my having to get to a point where I could really look at that moment and evaluate the value and importance of it. Later on in my life, in my 20s, I was looking at how could I really make a difference in some way, and who had influenced me greatly, and who did I respect, and also realized there was nobody recording their history, the brothers' history, and it was due to the betrayal of Jack, and nobody really wanting to talk about it, and yet I just felt that it was a wonderful responsibility to be a Warner and to share that story, and many different things happened right after I made that decision that just led me into doing this journey I've been on since '77, and will continue to take pleasure in expanding it. I'm delighted to say that I'm now working on an A-list feature film with a lovely, talented producer named Alan Goldman, who did La Vie en Rose, and the writer Nick Pileggi, who did Casino and Goodfellas, and we're about to have the first draft of the script, and we'll hopefully be in production on that at the beginning of next year. So this just keeps growing and expanding, and it's another way for me to get the story out there.
Right. That's great. I look forward to seeing that. Perfect. Anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot.
I know you're busy, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I thank you for this.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tony. I appreciate all this, and look forward to seeing what you turn it into, and to be continued.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Cass.
Okay,
It means a lot
care.
to me, and I will be in touch.
That'd be great.
A dream is just that. It is hopes, wants, and needs in the heart, longing to be filled. But when you take that first step toward that dream, the possibilities become limitless and endless. When pursued, a dream can take you into a world you never imagined, and take you beyond the corridors of worlds you have imagined. It all starts with you, and only you can find it. Long ago, 4 brothers had a dream, and set out to conquer that dream at all cost, allowing nothing or no one to get in their way. They found it, proving 100% that the journey to conquer the dream is just part of the adventure. The brothers, Harry, Sam, Abe, and Jack, the Warner brothers, have long since passed away. But the dream they started and conquered still lives today, helping so many talented storytellers, past, present, and future, to find their dreams and fill the hopes, wants, and needs in their heart. That is the dream. Never before have words spoken by founding brother Harry been so prophetic when he delivered these lines.
But we can take pride in the fact that our foundation is a firm one. It is solid bedrock for future generations of pioneers to build upon.
One fact will always be certain. Whenever the Warner shield flashes and takes hold on a screen in the world, whenever there is sound heard in film, Whenever it is good storytelling and imagination coming to life in front of your very eyes, whenever passion conquers the dream here. Four brothers are smiling and watching you enjoy a dream played out that all started with them.